welcome to Studio 14. Well, as you can tell, we're not in the studio. In fact, we're nowhere close. And it's summer, so that means it's all about backyard barbecues, relaxing, and trying to find time to enjoy the gorgeous weather. But, while you're having fun this summer, there are some things you need to keep in mind. And so to tell us about some of those things, I want to introduce Captain Patrick Love with Poudre Fire Authority. Patrick, thanks for being here.
Hi, Kim. Thanks very much for having me.
A lot of us, when we're enjoying our summer patios, we're barbecuing and we're maybe even roasting some marshmallows in those fire pits. But there's some rules and regulations that we need to keep in mind.
Cooking is actually the #1 cause of residential fires in the United States.
So you're kidding me.
So, unfortunately, we come across way too many of those types of incidents that can cause not only property loss, but life loss. So when you're cooking with a barbecue, make sure that your tank has been inspected, make sure that all the couplings have been tightened, and make sure that you keep any pets or children away from it when you're cooking. If you have a barbecue, please use it more than 10 feet away from your home or any other combustible surface.
Got it.
Within the city limits and the entire district of Poudre Fire Authority, we do allow backyard burning within a chimenea or a fire pit, making sure that it's at least 25 feet away.
Okay.
Again, the barbecue, minimum 10 feet, chimenea or any other fire pit, at least 25 feet away from a residence or any other combustible surface like a fence.
So there are some intricacies to the rule about 10 feet away. Like, for example, we're sitting here on one of the patios of one of the fire stations, but there's sprinklers above. Where can people learn more about the regulations regarding both barbecues and open fires?
Kim, a great place to go is our website, which is www.poudre-fire.org. And they can also actually follow us on Facebook to get additional information on barbecues and any other questions they might have of us.
Now, I know you guys have always done swiftwater rescue and have always been there to support people who get into trouble when tubing or rafting or kayaking, but you've recently upgraded your program. Tell us a little bit about it.
We have trained some of our firefighters in swiftwater rescue, and they can even go in water for rescues now, whereas before we had to wait for Larimer County Dive Team to respond and help us.
You're out having a good time and enjoying the pond, the lake. Keeping an eye on those little ones is really important.
You don't want to let kids out of your sight, even for a split second, because if you do, there's a huge potential that they may end up in the water. Make sure that there's always more than one person, and also make sure you take as many safety precautions as possible. And you mentioned the PFD, that's important also for not only kids but adults.
Yeah.
We never think an accident or incident will happen to us, but frankly, the truth is we just don't know.
Well, I know it was a huge year for the Poudre. I mean, it was running really big, really fast early. And it's even been kind of cool, and we've had some rain here in July, but things are going to heat up again. And when it does, the grasses are going to dry out, and that provides a risk for brush fire.
It really does. And even earlier this summer, the grasses have already started to dry out, and we were averaging about a fire a day. In the vegetation. If you're going to be using any fire, say in a barbecue outside, to please be careful when you are using that around dried vegetation. If a fire does start, it can get out of hand very quickly. Even though, again, people may think we're safe from wildfire, it still can happen even in the heart of the city. Not only that, but other natural and man-made disasters has the potential to affect thousands of our citizens in the Fort Collins area. One thing that the city of Fort Collins has done is utilize a cooperative effort with Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority to develop the new emergency notification system. And that is a system where someone can go to www.leta911.org and sign up on the system, and they can get alerts not only from their home phone, but they can get them on cell phones, through instant messaging, and also on pagers.
But you can also sign up for multiple locations. So I know I signed up for my home, my work, and my kids' school. And as a parent, I think that's a great feature and really something nice that the city's offering. Patrick, thanks for your time today. I learned a lot about summer safety, and it's always great to have that reminder about the LEADA 911 system. Well, I'm here at the CHIP construction site, and that's essentially College and Harmony, and you can tell it is busy. This is one of the most busy intersections we have here in Fort Collins, and it's under construction. So to tell us a little bit more, I have Claire Thomas here, and Claire is with the CHIP team.
I'm sure, as everyone is aware, this is a really big mess for travelers, for businesses, for pedestrians, and we really appreciate everyone's patience while we improve the roadways.
And that's what this project is all about. It's all about how do we make this intersection a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to move traffic through, safer for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Exactly, all while maintaining a safe work environment for all the many crews that are on site every day with just concrete barriers and orange barrels between them and rolling traffic.
Yeah, and I'm feeling a little unsafe myself, so these guys every day are feeling this way. There's traffic behind us, there's traffic over here. So a few tips to keep in mind when you're actually driving through these work zones. First of all, put down that cell phone. It's a bad habit to begin with. It's even worse during construction zones. Pay attention, slow down.
One of the problems that people have in driving through a construction zone is they're not used to all the construction vehicles entering and exiting the site. So while we have concrete barriers and barrels to keep traffic out, we also have vehicles coming into the site and leaving. So we want to remind people to look out for those because those are a lot bigger than the normal car.
How long is this project going to last? I know we're in phase 2 right now, entering phase 3.
Right. Towards the end of July, we're going to start phase 3, and that's when we're going to close a small section of Harmony Road from College Avenue west to Mason Street. So it's just a short little piece of land, but really it's a throughway for so many people delivering things, going to businesses, going home, going to do errands. So you're going to have to watch out for our alternate routes, which are going to be Trilby to the south, Shields to the west, and Horsetooth to the north.
And I mean, this is a big deal. This is like the big closure of this project.
Yes, it's the one main closure. We're going to be working on the west lanes of College. We're going to have people driving on these new east lanes that are all concrete now, concrete panels that'll last for 30 to 60 years. We won't have to get back in here again. We're going to be building more curb and gutter, sidewalk, and a median on the west side of College in that Harmony closure. And then in the middle of August, on or around August 13th, we'll start phase 4, which is the last phase. Everyone cheer, yay, the last phase. And that will take us through Mason Street west to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe line railroad tracks.
Okay.
And those will be lane shifts. No closures.
So no closures. So our closures are basically going to last 3 to 4 weeks, no longer than 4 weeks.
Right, exactly, within 4 weeks.
And then after that, construction zone is still set up, but all of the closures are done.
And we'll be installing landscaping and our urban design elements, which is kind of a fancy way of saying we're giving character to the intersection.
Yeah, not just one big concrete intersection,
yeah.
Right.
We're going to have some really nice light fixtures and features, safer turn signaling, some nice effects on the edges where there'll be fencing and landscaping and potted flowers during the growing season. And it'll really add a lot of character to the intersection.
That's great. Where can people go to get more information?
Oh, well, I hope they go to fcgov.com/CHIP. And there's all kinds of information. You can sign up for an electronic newsletter that we send out whenever we have new updates. We have a map of the alternate routes. We have a map of the construction zone, contact information, why we're doing the project, our funding sources, and the phasing schedule.
A whole bunch of information.
A whole bunch of information.
All right, so the one thing you need to remember, again, stay safe in those cone zones, and some closures coming up later this month and into August. Well, I think there's maybe just 1 or 2 things in life that we can all agree on. And one of them is nobody likes being stuck in traffic. And, as much as I have been known to maybe complain a little bit, I've actually learned that getting traffic lights to line up so that I can get to where I'm going quickly is a lot harder than it sounds. So today, here in the studio, I have with me our city traffic engineer, Joe Olson. Joe, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Look, I already have you nervous because I'm talking about how it drives me crazy sometimes when I hit those red lights. But I guess I kind of understand that you apparently aren't timing all of these lights for my commute.
Well, we're trying to.
For me personally.
We're really trying to time them for everybody's commutes. It can be a challenging task, as you noted, though, for a variety of reasons.
Well, it is. And, I think as a driver, it seems like such a simple thing, right? I just want my lights to sort of fall green one by one into place. But there's so many factors that go into this.
Yeah, it's actually funny you'd say that, because one of the things we hear a lot is, why can't they work like they do down in Loveland where they have the one-way streets? Because down there it's so obvious as you're driving down that they turn green right at the right times as you go down them. And the thing that we have to remind everybody is those are one-way streets. And the math is pretty simple there,
right?
You know, to figure out how to offset those green lights to get them to do it. But the problem we get into is where you have a two-way street. If you set them up just to work for one direction, the other direction may very well get a red light every single light. And so, you know, it becomes much more challenging when you look at trying to progress traffic in both directions. Or if you have a grid where you're trying to do all four directions,
right?
north,
And as
south,
I say,
east,
then
and
you
west.
add sort of the
Right.
Perpendicular direction, and it gets much more complicated.
Right.
So how does the timing of traffic signals work? You know, when I think of it as just one road. How do you guys actually make the plans that help time the signals?
Well, when people talk about like the best signal timing or optimized signal timing, there's actually a lot of different ways you can do that. I mean, one way would be to try to minimize delays at each intersection. Another way to do it would be to minimize the number of stops along a main arterial, or some combination of the two, because they don't necessarily work hand in hand. To get that good progression up and down an arterial, sometimes we have to make the delays longer for the side streets in order to make that happen.
Right.
And so really the first thing you have to do when you talk about how you're going to time the signals is define what your goals are of your program and what you're trying to achieve.
So how do we measure it at the City of Fort Collins?
Well, we just did a retiming project last year where we looked at all the arterial streets in the city and basically retimed them. And our goal of that project was to actually try to minimize stops along the main streets primarily, at least during the busy times of day. And again, what that can mean for the side streets is longer delays, but the overall benefit of minimizing stops is less fuel consumption, less air pollution, things like that. And so that's really what we were trying to achieve by trying to keep that flow going. Plus, it's, as you noted, it's a lot less annoying when you're not just going from light to light stopping.
Yeah, sure. And did we do all of the major streets in Fort Collins, or are we focusing on certain maybe high traffic areas or heavily used areas?
We did all the arterial streets in town, so that would be College, Shields, Timberline, Harmony, you know, and others too. But basically all those big streets where we get the most bang for your buck by trying to minimize stops is where we did that.
What happens, because I know this happens a lot, maybe a lot's not the right word, but what happens when someone requests a traffic light? You know, there's circumstances where people say, you know, I'm trying to turn out of my neighborhood, I'm making a left turn in the morning, and I simply cannot find a break in traffic to do it. You know, city, please come and install a traffic light. You know, how does that happen? How does that process happen? And what does that do to then the timing of the routes?
That's a great question, because the other thing that we haven't talked about that really impacts our ability to progress traffic is the spacing of the signals.
Okay.
Again, when you're talking about two-way progression, it becomes very sensitive of the spacing of the signals. So, you know, a lot of people, when they're talking about traffic signals, they're thinking of them as a spot improvement. They're thinking of them as a way to get out of their neighborhood or out of a commercial driveway or something like that. And in that regard, they obviously do help when they're put on a busy street. The problem with that is if they're at a bad spot, it can really affect that progression from light to light as you go up and down the street, which it doesn't necessarily just impact at that light, because if there's an untimely stop there, then when they're released from there, they can potentially get stopped again up the street.
Light.
And so it really kind of mushrooms. And so when we talk about a traffic signal, we don't really think of them as a spot improvement. We really think of them as a system improvement. And we try to place them at locations that are beneficial to the entire system.
So when you said a bad spot, what does that mean? I mean, too close to a light, essentially?
Yeah.
Too close to an
Not
existing
necessarily.
light?
I mean, it all becomes the spacing. And so sometimes it's too close, sometimes it's too long.
Oh.
It just depends on how the system is set up. You know, in an ideal world, we'd have signals spaced every half mile. We don't have that, because that really lends itself to that two-way progression. But we don't have that very many places because there is so much demand for additional ways to get in and out of places. And so the more you put in at awkward or unusual spacings, which I mean, you know, everybody knows, you can see that anytime you drive College or Shields or some of those streets where there's a lot of signals in there where the spacing isn't really optimal to progress traffic.
So is there other solutions, you know, from a traffic engineering standpoint? I mean, I just don't even know what the other solution would be. If it's not a good spot for a traffic light, is there other things that, you know, we can do to help those people who are frustrated because they can't get out and make that left turn?
Yeah, and you know, and sometimes this isn't really what people want to hear, but one of the things that we look at is doing access control, where instead of allowing a full movement intersection, we'll look at making it a right in, right out type of intersection by putting a median in. So instead of being able to go left, they might have to go right and around the block type of a thing.
Right.
It's less convenient for those people doing that, but again, for the system, it can actually be better overall.
There are, so many different options than just the traditional traffic light available, but that's obviously the one I think folks are most familiar with and always see as maybe the right solution. When you guys did this new timing project, did you look at one timing pattern per route, or does it change based on the time of day? How does the implementation of the new routes work?
We actually look at the traffic flow patterns throughout the day. And so we see the peaks and valleys as the day progresses, and the changes directionally. Sometimes a day it can be higher volumes northbound or higher volumes southbound, or vice versa. And what we end up doing then is we change the timing plans throughout the course of the day to account for the fluctuating volumes and the varying travel patterns. And so we actually end up with, at most places in town, 4 different timing plans that run. We run them by time of day. We have like an AM peak plan, a midday plan, a PM peak plan, and then we have a new off-peak plan, which probably requires some explanation in and of itself.
Probably a whole nother show to itself.
Yeah. Well, again, because what we've been talking about is trying to progress traffic up and down the arterials.
Right.
The big complaint or concern that we've heard in Fort Collins is in the evening or early in the morning, sometimes when volumes are lower on the main streets, the weights on the side streets are really excessive.
Okay.
And that's because up until we implemented this new off-peak plan, we were still running very long cycle lengths even late in the evening. Cycle length is the time it takes to get through everything one time. And so we were running like 110, 120 second cycle lengths at a lot of locations. This new off-peak plan is only an 85-second cycle length, which really cuts down on the side street delays during those lower volume times.
At that intersection where you feel like you're the only car and the light's not changing.
Right. So while we were focusing on progressing traffic and minimizing stops during the busy parts of the day, during the lower volume times, we did try to cut down on those side street delays for people.
We talk traffic, we talk about minimizing delays, but there's also a safety component that you guys are looking at. And in fact, I think it was last year, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there was, you guys are working on this comprehensive study of traffic accidents and trying to identify some root causes. And I know there were some great data that came out of that from bikes. Have you guys had that same opportunity to sort of dig into the data about car traffic accidents, and perhaps what are some, common mistakes or common themes among what's going on?
We have, and we've looked specifically at signalized intersections because, which this probably surprises some people, but we actually tend to see more accidents at signalized locations than we do unsignalized locations.
Really?
It's kind of one of the big misunderstandings about traffic signals is that a lot of people see them as a cure-all for safety issues, when in reality they actually tend to cause some types of accidents. And so we've been looking at those real closely. We've been identifying signalized intersections that have an unusually high number of accidents, and we're actually looking for some low-cost signal timing adjustments that might be able to improve those situations.
So that's interesting. You said that traffic lights can actually contribute to accident rates. Is there a certain type of accidents that might occur more frequently?
Yeah, it's primarily rear-end accidents, which, again, if you're just on the open road, and it's always green if there's no light. And anytime we introduce a red light and people have to stop, it gives them an opportunity to run into each other. And so we tend to see an increase in rear-end accidents, and then at some locations we also see an increase in left-turning accidents, which are if you're waiting to turn left and you turn left in somebody in the opposite direction, you're supposed to be yielding, and then you turn in front of somebody and they hit you. We tend to see more of those at signals as well.
Well, that brings up sort of a cool new thing we have. We're testing out here in Fort Collins, and I'm not going to come up with the right traffic term, Joe, so you'll have to forgive me, but it's essentially a yellow flashing arrow. All right, so tell me about this.
That's pretty much it.
Good. I used the right term.
It's a highly technical term, flashing yellow arrow. Basically, this is something that's been being researched for a long time nationwide, particularly by the Federal Highway Administration. They've been looking at ways to minimize these left turn accidents at signalized intersections. And really what we're talking about is what we'd call a permitted left turn, where you're waiting, you're yielding to oncoming traffic, and then when it's clear, you can turn left.
Okay.
And what they found is right now the way we do that is with just a green ball. The signal displays a green ball, which means you can go, but only after yielding. What they're finding is there's some misunderstanding of the meaning of the green ball. Some people just won't go, which is really not a safety issue. It's more of an efficiency issue. But more concerning is that some people are thinking that green means go, whether it's a ball or an arrow, and they're turning left in front of people. And so, like I said, they've looked at a variety of options to try to improve that, and what they've come up with is an alternative is this flashing yellow arrow, which will replace the green ball over the left turn lanes, and instead will be a yellow arrow that's flashing.
You'll essentially have in some cases, a green arrow, red arrow, yellow flashing arrow.
That's right. Yeah, and so instead of going to a green ball, it'll go to a flashing yellow arrow, which has the same meaning. It still means yield, and then turn when it's safe. But it's going to be different, and supposedly from the research that they've done, the compliance is better with that than it has been with the green ball.
So do we actually have that installed right now?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're looking at, in the next few months, we're going to start implementing some of those.
And where are you looking at? Can you reveal that information?
Yeah, we're looking at some intersections along College. We're going to start out at College and Foothills at the mall there, east and west. Right now, we run eastbound first and westbound second, which takes away green time from College Avenue.
Right.
We're going to actually implement the flashing yellow arrow and run east and west together there, which should really improve our ability to progress traffic up and down College. We're also looking at at College and Monroe and College and Kensington along College, and both of those are safety concerns.
Okay.
And we feel like by using the flashing yellow arrow, it's going to allow us to do some things differently there that will make those left turns a little bit more safe.
So what's the busiest road?
The busiest road?
Here in Fort Collins.
College.
Most people, easily College.
And then Harmony.
And then Harmony. Yeah. So that actually reminds me, what happens when we have these sort of large construction projects? I mean, College and Harmony right now, they're doing a lot of work on that intersection. Do you have to retime that entire route because of some of the work going on there?
We didn't retime the entire route. We retimed that intersection,
sure.
But we kept the synchronization so that when people are being released, say northbound from College and Harmony, they're still in step with the other lights going up College, and the same on Harmony. But the reality is, getting through that intersection, there really isn't any progression because of the congestion, and so we've retimed that to try to get people through as good as we can. But it was mainly focused right there at that intersection.
How often do you change timing patterns? You've said we just sort of went through this whole retiming project that we implemented last year. So we're just sort of seeing the results.
Yeah.
Do we do that constantly? Is it an annual project?
Well, that one was actually a federal grant that we had to do that project, and so we looked at the entire city all at once.
Oh, very cool.
And we like to try to do that on a regular basis as things change. The reality, though, is that we don't always have that kind of money to do that. So it's more of an ongoing. We've got a good baseline right now with these new timing plans that we've got.
Right.
But now it's more of a looking at individual locations that maybe need some tweaking here and there. And so we're going to be doing that here for the next probably several years, looking at things and making changes. And then down the road, if the economy picks back up and volumes start changing a lot, we'd look at redoing things on an as needed basis.
Sure. That's an interesting link. So do you actually see more people driving when, the times are good?
Yeah, absolutely. Volumes are actually down a little bit right now compared to historic, when things were going good in the early 2000s. I mean, not significantly, but they're definitely down, or at best just staying even right now.
Wow, that's really interesting. I never realized that. So we talked a little bit about, all the things you guys are doing to help move cars, but you guys aren't only talking about cars. You guys also are involved with our bike program and pedestrian access. And there's a new signal on the south end of town, I believe, that is, now this term I think I actually do have right, a pedestrian beacon.
Close.
Ah, darn it. All right, what is it?
It's a pedestrian hybrid beacon.
Oh, see, just one word.
It's a hybrid. They call it a hybrid because it's a hybrid between a traffic signal and a warning beacon. It kind of combines the two. And we put our first one in earlier this year over on Harmony at Regency. And basically what it is when a pedestrian pushes the button, the light goes red for motorists on Harmony. And of course, by law, they have to stop for the red light.
Right.
But after a short time, then the light goes from solid red to flashing red, which then, if the pedestrians are gone or it's clear to go, motorists are allowed to proceed on the flashing red. Just like you would at a stop sign, you'd treat it like a stop sign
Right.
with a flashing red light on the top of it. You can come up and stop, and if it's safe to go, then you can go. And so the idea is that it's giving the positive protection of a red light to pedestrians to protect
Right.
them, but it doesn't necessarily have the full delay for motorists that a normal signal would have,
So
where
if
they
you're
just have to stay at a red
one
light
of
for
those
a
fast
long
people
time.
that zooms across your crosswalk,
Right.
the car's not still waiting for the light to turn again.
Right, because we have to time the light for kind of the slowest pedestrian that might go across there. But like you said, a lot of people are on bikes or jogging and things like that where they're across so much faster, and then it's just excess delay, excess fuel consumed, excess air pollution. And it also tends to make some people impatient, and when they see the light go yellow or whatever, they try to bust through it.
Yeah.
And so we don't necessarily have great compliance or as good of compliance as we'd like at some of our pedestrian signals. So this is a way to try to get the best of both worlds.
As a pedestrian, do you notice the difference? Does it look different?
Not for pedestrians. It's basically you still push the button and you wait for the walk light to go.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing at these as it would be at a regular signal.
So when did we install that?
It was in February.
Okay. How's it going?
So far, so good. And you know, these have been tried other places, and
Right.
what people told us is the biggest thing you'll see motorists who aren't willing to go on the flashing red.
Right.
But that's making a mistake, and I don't call it a mistake. It's being conservative.
Right.
It's not just it's okay because nobody's going to get hurt because of it. We'd
Right.
rather have people being conservative and not going rather than just blowing through. And so that's just exactly what we've seen. We've seen a lot of people who aren't willing to go, but we're okay with that because it's an efficiency thing, but it's certainly not a safety issue.
We talked about the yellow flashing arrow. Are there any other intersections or new tools or new tricks you have up your sleeve that you're thinking about testing out here in Fort Collins?
Well, they're not necessarily new anymore, but obviously we've got
They're new to me.
we've got roundabouts to talk
Right.
about. In the right locations, roundabouts make a lot of sense, and we're always looking at locations where there's potential for roundabouts to be used instead of signals. You know, they've got a lot of advantages as far as you know, the conflict points, so they tend to be safer than signalized intersections. You know, we talked about this accident issues at signals. We don't see those at roundabouts.
Right.
They don't have any power to be consumed, and so once they're in, the maintenance on them is a lot lower than it is for a traffic signal. And the delays tend to be lower for people in a lot of cases. So we're always looking for places to use roundabouts too.
I mean, the use of roundabouts seems sort of like a learned behavior. You know, a lot of people were initially uncomfortable with it, and then people get used to it. And you know, I used to live up in Vail, and there's always roundabouts, and so you just sort of soon it becomes your habit. You don't even think twice about it. Does that take sort of a long time for a community to embrace that idea, especially when you're using both roundabouts and traffic signals?
I think so. I think anything new tends to be, uncomfortable, and so
Sure.
a lot of people, aren't on board with roundabouts yet, and so we're working to, one, make sure we're using them where they make sense, and then two, trying to educate people and help them understand the benefits of the roundabouts.
Right, right. Well, I've been to your website. There's tons of information about traffic safety and the safety data, the accident data that you guys have collected. There's information about actually the success of the retiming project, fcgov.com/traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I always tease you, Joe, because there's more to traffic engineering than I ever knew possible. And I appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us a little bit about it. And we're going to have you come back maybe in another year, and we'll see just how much faster we are getting through town than this year.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Joe. And thanks you all for watching. We'll see you next time on Studio 14.